Hello, everyone. This is Stacy Lake, and this is my Let's Talk Jackson for October 5th, where we're going to be discussing the historic recall election of County Executive Frank White. Now, for those who don't know who I am, my name is Stacy Lake. I'm running for County Executive in the Democratic primary this August 4th, 2026. And which means that this is actually very um, uh, not critical, but it's important for my race. And when I say important for my race, what I mean is I was the only Democratic candidate that actually challenged Frank White in 2022. I alerted my entire neighborhood, and I tried to alert the entire county of how poor Frank White was as county executive and how his decisions hurt specifically the corridor or downtown Kansas City residents in the 2019 property tax crisis, and that he was going to do the same thing again towards Eastern Jack in 2023. My message did go out, but it did not go out far enough. I lost the Democratic primary in 2022 by 4 percentage points. And this mostly had to do with the fact that I received at the time zero Democratic establishment support. So when we're talking about the recall and when we're really having these in-depth conversations of how did it begin and what happened and why Frank White was recalled, we kind of have to think to ourselves first, why was Frank White recalled? Why did in 2022, when Frank White ran for county executive, he had no policy? He didn't have any plans for the future of Jackson County besides increasing people's property tax valuations in 2023. And besides that, the Democratic establishment supported him, and he ended up winning the Democratic primary race without giving any promises to the Jackson County public besides the fact that he was going to do the 2023 property tax crisis again. And when I say that again, remember, I'm referring also to the 2019 property tax crisis. Now, we're going to first talk about chaos in the county on how it actually began. And when we're talking about chaos in the county, when Frank White started his tenure again, and so we're starting in 2022, he was coming off of a very close Democratic primary, and then in May he issued another property tax crisis in 2023 that led to over 60,000 appeals, which caused massive chaos in the county. But there were other things besides the property tax crisis. We had the budget issues that he had to deal with, which the two main ones that I really want to talk about here today is the $70 million in unspent American Rescue Plan Act dollars, which is the COVID relief funds that the United States federal government gave to Jackson County to spend for COVID relief. Up to this day, $70 million of the ARPA funds have not been utilized and still sits in the Jackson County government coffers. But also, this year in 2025, we had a 6-month delay of the budget. And this 6-month delay of the budget has caused our Jackson County government to lose in over $300 million in grant opportunities. And there was also other things like the stadium fiasco, the fact that the stadium question was put on the ballot before any contract or any plan for what's going to happen for the future of the Royals and Chiefs stadiums were actually decided or concretely decided. But also, there was unfeathered chaos in our Jackson County legislature. Many of you are aware of this, but just to quickly go over some of the main points. Just this year, Jackson County legislator Manny Abarca had that case where Everyone learned that he took his child without consent, and there was a potentially domestic violence case against his wife, or his wife alleged that that Manny assaulted her. Then we had the whole Deron McGee issues, where Deron McGee, as chair, he oversaw the 6 month delay of the passage of our budget. As chair, he oversaw that the $70 million of ARPA funds have still remained unspent. But then we have the whole issues with the lawsuit that happened regarding the 2023 property tax crisis. As many as my followers are aware, there was a lawsuit that was filed and litigated in 2024, and it was dismissed with prejudice because of the interference caused by Sean Smith. And without that interference, we potentially could have had the courts roll back the 2023 property tax crisis. And these issues in totality have led the residents of Jackson County to be unable to trust our government leaders to hold our leadership accountable and to listen to our residents' concerns. And so with these issues, it kind of snowballed into the beginning of the grassroots organization. Now, before I continue with this, I really want to state again, my name is Stacey Lake. I'm running for Jackson County Executive. And if you want to support my campaign, please go to jacksoncountyexecutive.com, where you can donate and you can volunteer there. But now to continue. Grassroots beginnings. So when we're talking about where the recall for Frank White started, it started and this is from my viewpoint, when a page appeared called Recall 7% Frank White. And a core group of people started to form to ask people to, one, create a petition to get signatures to recall Frank White. And those core group of people, to the best of my knowledge, was Stephanie Cohen, Alicia Breidenbach, and Rita. And these individuals created this massive following where they actually found an attorney to issue a petition and start collecting signatures. And they were collecting signatures in the ice, snow, and rain. And even when it was their darkest hour, which I think their darkest hour was probably in the winter of 2024, they still kept in the belief that they would recall Frank White. And so those individuals are very much responsible and should get a big part of the credit for the recall of Frank White petition initiative for being successful. But there was something else as well. There was massive dark money influence in this race. And we have to talk about the organization called Democracy in Action. Now, in December 4th, 2024, Democracy in Action publicly got involved in the Recall for Frank White campaign. Now, Democracy in Action is a political action committee that has and I call this a leader in title, right? The leader in title was a person named Guy Howard, but the leader in fact is a person named Bridget Williams, who is the executive director of the Heavy Constructors Association. Now, why am I calling Bridget Williams the leader in fact instead of Guy Howard? Well, mostly because, one, Guy Howard, even though he was the leader of this political action committee, he first lived in Lawrence, Kansas, had no prior, had lacked deep experience in collecting petition managing petition initiatives or collecting signatures for petition initiatives. But also, he was the brother-in-law of Bridget Williams. And I want to show you this clip really quickly.
There's a renewed effort right now to recall Jackson County Executive Frank White. A group called Democracy in Action has formed in the last 2 months, collecting signatures to try to get this on the ballot in April of next year. So new tonight at 6 o'clock, Jonathan Ketch joins us live downtown after talking to the leader of that group today. John?
That's right, Kevin. Several efforts to recall Frank White have gone nowhere in the past 5 years or so. County Executive Frank White would not talk to us on camera today, but he released a statement calling this, quote, a political sideshow. Part of White's statement goes on to say it's funded by a dark money group and led by individuals who prioritize self-promotion over the future of Jackson County. While we don't know who specifically the county executive was referring to when he said dark money, Fox 4 talked to Guy Howard Wednesday, the executive director of Democracy in Action. He's also talked to Mike Hendricks of the Kansas City Star. Who is supporting your initiative financially?
So, and I think Mike Hendricks covered this, and I don't know if you know this, but so we're set up as a 501(c) or C4.
4C, C4,
and we're
he doesn't
not
know.
Disclosing who's backing us financially.
In the summer of
that?
2023,
No
we reported
disclosure.
organizers would need more than 42,000 signatures to start the process of recalling White. So far, Howard says he's collected about 15,000. They collected signatures on Election Day.
So we got funding late prior to Election Day. And we wanted to give people out at 85 polling locations. We only ended up at about 20.
Howard doesn't live in Jackson County. He lives in Lawrence, adding that he was hired by a group of people who were passionate about this effort. His sister-in-law is Bridget Williams, the executive director of the Heavy Constructors Association. She says she doesn't know who hired Howard.
We are supportive of the recall as an organization. There's a lot of frustration because he won't meet with people. He doesn't return phone calls. There are a lot of our projects that are being held up administratively.
White's full statement is up on our website right now, Lauren at fox4kc.com.
See, it's very questionable for Bridget Williams to say that she really doesn't know how her brother-in-law was hired when her union was one of the major financial backers of Democracy in Action. Now, the reason why I call this dark money is because this political action committee did not disclose who was providing them money, and that's technically dark money into our races. Now, later on, when the effort actually picked up steam and we started to collect signatures, and massive signatures were actually being turned into the election boards, there was a news article that broke that Democracy in Action owed over $150,000 to a polling firm called Coefficient, and Coefficient was one of the polling companies that collected a massive amount of these signatures. And also, just to state in this clip, there's like a 5 to 10 second part where it's muted, but the sound will come back on. So sorry about that. It's not. It's Fox 4's fault.
Is for Bill Moss. He joins the Ring of Honor, the Chiefs Hall of Fame, out at Arrowhead Stadium. Harold, thanks. We'll see you a bit later. $150,000. That's how much a local group owes a polling firm that's collected signatures to force a recall of County Executive Frank White.
The group's called Democracy in Action, and its executive director spoke to Fox 4 about the effort months ago. Fox 4's Jonathan Ketz continues our coverage live from the Jackson County Courthouse tonight. John, you talked to one of the group supporters?
So at this part, Mike Ketz's mic is off, but they're going to turn it up soon.
Spoke to Fox 4 in December about this issue. Friday, County Executive Frank White wouldn't comment. Guy's sister-in-law, Bridget Williams, said Democracy in Action owed Coefficient $150,000 to get the signatures released from them so they can send them into the Kansas City and Jackson County election boards.
Democracy in Action is trying to raise the money. There are many people out there that would normally contribute that are afraid of retaliation from the county executive if it becomes known that they've contributed.
Friday, Williams said that the entity Howard's in charge of would not disclose who its donors are because they don't have to as a 501c4.
You know, they are
Dark
gun
money.
shy. You know, there are things that happen with the mayor's 501c4 that, you know, where contributors were released, and so there is a fear.
The mayor's Core of Progress for Greater Kansas City faced scrutiny earlier this year after it came out that Mayor Quentin Lucas used that entity to pay for his trips to the Super Bowl. Last month, White said the recall effort had to do with the fact he was on the vote no side when it came to the stadiums.
I'm not going to deny those stadiums will put people to work and will continue to keep people working.
And will benefit the heavies.
And will benefit the industry, the construction industry as a whole. However, Frank White has proven that he does not care about what these increase in property taxes will do to the citizens.
There is no word when Democracy in Action will get that $150,000, but legislator Sean Smith on Wednesday said that once that happens, he believes there will be more than enough signatures to get much closer to a Frank White recall special election.
So with this, we already know that at least $150,000 was injected into this race by Democracy in Action in order to collect signatures for the recall for Frank White effort, and that the Democracy in Action / the Heavy Constructors Association was influenced large in part due to the stadium vote that failed last year. And so I'm saying this because we have to realize that the recall for Frank White wasn't just a grassroots effort, but it also had this other seedier side to it with this dark money injection from Democracy in Action. So the recall from Frank White started from grassroots efforts, but then got a big push from this organization called Democracy in Action. Now, after they found the $150,000 and was able to submit the signatures in. On June 30th, 2025, we actually were alerted that 43,011 signatures were certified for the election. I'm going to play this clip for everyone else, for everyone too, because this is very important.
Well, the heat has been turned way up in the Jackson County Legislature. A push for a recall petition of County Executive Frank White has enough signatures, according to the County Election Board, for county legislators to review and set a date for voters to determine if White keeps his job. KSHB 41's Alyssa Jackson with more.
Should Frank White be recalled as Jackson County executive? I'm Alyssa Jackson, and after 43,000 signatures on a recall petition, that question is what Jackson County voters could see on a ballot this fall.
Verifying a sufficient number of signatures in the Frank White Jr. recall.
43,011 registered voters in Jackson County signed off on a petition to remove Frank White from office. Only 42,902 signatures were required, which is 20% of the total votes cast for him in 2022. I reached out to every legislator. Some declined to comment, others did not reply. The county executive declined an interview and was not present during Monday's legislature meeting. He did send a statement saying, in part, today's announcement is simply a procedural step, not a verdict. It does reveal how far certain interests are willing to go to punish elected officials who refuse to cave to political pressure and backroom stadium subsidy deals.
Hold on a second. I'm going to put that quote back on the screen. See, this is one of the faults with Frank White. during this entire Recall Frank White race, Frank White was so focused on the fact that the reason why people were signing this petition initiative was because of the stadium question, which wasn't necessarily true. In my opinion, I think 80% of the people who signed the Recall Frank White petition initiative did it because their property taxes increased significantly, and they wanted to see a change in leadership. And also because of Frank White's behavior. Frank White really isn't a great communicator. And I say that because when the 2019 property tax crisis happened and the 2023 property tax crisis happened, he didn't actually go out to the neighborhoods to explain why people's property tax values were increased, or why he believed the property tax assessments were lawful. Side note, the courts found that these property tax increases were unlawful, but we're going to push that aside. He had a person, his county assessor named Gail McCain Beatty, actually go out and answer people's questions. And Gail isn't even a good communicator either. And this statement here, where he says today's announcement is simply not a procedural today's announcement is simply a procedural step and not a verdict, is him not really taking accountability for what got him here in the first place. It was not the stadium issue. I can tell you that a lot of people, especially in the core, agreed with Frank White's stance on not giving a blank check to billionaires, right? But it was because of his rejection of the idea that the property tax assessments were done improperly, or that Gail was wrong. And that's why he's here in the first place. His denial essentially led to this recall escalating and ultimately his downfall. Now, we have to talk about the recall lawsuit. On July 9th, 2025, a person named Stephanie Cohen actually filed a lawsuit, and it wasn't just Stephanie Cohen, it was Stephanie Cohen, Fawn Collins, Mark Anthony Jones, and Jay Perry. And I want to mention these people's names because they were also the people involved in this grassroots organization with good intentions to recall Frank White. They didn't have any they didn't do anything with the dark money efforts. They were a part of this group of the grassroots organizers from the beginning. They filed a lawsuit against the Jackson County Legislature, Frank White, the clerk of the Jackson County Legislature, and the election boards in order to set a date for the recall election for August 26, 2025. Now, per the charter, their argument for this, they were stating that per the charter, that a special election needed to happen within 60 days when the petitions are filed. And they argued that since they filed the required threshold of signatures on June 27th or June 30th, whichever date they would count, that means that pursuant to the charter, they were the Jackson County government was responsible for providing a special election on August 26, 2025. Now, on August 1st, 2025, a hearing then was heard on this matter. And during this hearing, I believe that the judge made his decision to hold the special election due to the election board testimony. Now, the lady who testified for the election board basically stated that it was impossible for them to have an election on August 26, 2025. And the reason why is because they would need to get a lot of volunteers to be at the polls. They would have to send out mailers to people telling them where their poll sites were, and that it was virtually impossible for them to have this election on August 26, 2025. The judge then asked the witness who represents the election board, what date would they be able to have this election? and she stated September 30th, 2025. And because of that, the judge then ordered that the election to be held on September 30th, 2025. And give me a second so I can pull up that document really quickly. Hold on a second. It's right here. Now, here is the actual case that was filed again by Stephanie Cohen, Fawn Collins, Mark Anthony Jones, and Jay Perry. And this is the order and judgment given by Honorable Judge Seaton, basically stating that the election has to be held on September 30th, 2025. So it says right here, it is further ordered, adjudged, and decreed that the election and recall of County Executive Frank White shall be held Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. And that's when it was actually placed on the ballot. Now, on August 11th, 2025, so a week later, the election board and Frank White moved to certify this judge's order for purposes of appeal. So what this means is that they're asking the judge to make this into a final judgment so that they could appeal this to the higher courts. And then what happened was, and this is the next document, on September 2nd, 2025, the judge denied the motion to certify his order for the September 30th, 2025 election. And so what this means is Judge Seaton basically stated, no, I'm not going to state that my order is ready for it to be appealed or heard by the higher courts because it's not a final order, and I'm denying you this chance to appeal to the higher courts. However, on September 26, 2025, so we're going to the new document, Frank White then appealed to the Western District Court of Appeals and basically submitted a petition of prohibition and mandamus, and what a petition for writ of prohibition and mandamus. And what that basically means is Frank White is asking the court, Frank White is essentially going above Judge Seaton's head right now and is saying, yes, Judge Seaton said that I couldn't appeal this, so we're just unilaterally appealing this and asking the Supreme Court to take or not the Supreme Court, but first the Court of Appeals to take this matter into their own hands and stop this election, because what Seaton is doing is not complying with law, essentially. Like his order is not complying with what the law states, right? And when he filed this, the Western District Court of Appeals denied it, basically saying that Judge Seaton's ruling was a valid and proper ruling, essentially, and that the election needed to be held on September 30th, 2025. One thing I want to note is the time, right? So the judge denied the first motion to certify his order for appeal on September 2nd, 2025. Frank White literally waited 24 days after the judge denied the appeal to be certified in order to file this petition for writ of prohibition, right? And when he filed this on September 26, 2025, this is literally 4 days before the election. And I can just tell you as an attorney, like, that's not good. That's not a good way to practice the law, especially when you have an election that essentially cost the Jackson County taxpayers $2 million. He should have filed that writ on September 3rd or at the latest September 12th. So we're talking about 10 days after the order. But he waited 24 days past the judge denying him to appeal his decision, and essentially 4 days before the race. I don't know what Frank White's legal strategy was, but it wasn't for me. If he was planning to file this writ of prohibition, he should have done it much sooner, but he did not. So this next document I'm showing you is the actual denial from the Missouri Court of Appeals, the Western District. Okay, so here's the date on September 29th, where they basically denied their petition for writ. Okay, now next is on the right when the Western District Court of Appeals denied the petition for writ, it was then appealed to the Supreme Court. And on October 1st, so we're talking about the day after the election, the Supreme Court then denied again Frank White's petition for writ. And basically stated that, the September 30th, that they weren't going to prohibit the September 30th, 2025 election from occurring. So the recall election happens, right? This is September 30th, 2025. And there was an extreme blowout with the recall election. And what essentially happened is that the people that voted to recall Frank White was 64,400 people. The people that voted to not recall Frank White was 11,000 people. That means 85% of the people that voted on September 30th, 2025, voted to recall Frank White, which is massive, historical, and it actually gives the illusion of this is agreed to on both sides. It was a nonpartisan issue. Both Republicans and Democrats believed that Frank White needed to be recalled. Now, after this recall happened, Kay Barnes was then appointed as the interim county executive for 30 days only. She's not going to be the county executive or the interim county executive until Frank White's term is over. And this is why I have the next question of is it over? Okay. And the answer is no. This whole situation is definitely not over. And this is I'm going to tell you guys something that is not being reported by the media right now. I don't know why. Frank White still has a chance to get this entire election essentially overturned, okay? And this is my part where I call the legal battle continues. We're going to go back to the court cases now. So the court case that was filed by Stephanie Cohen and others in order to certify, or in order to have this election in the first place, Frank White also filed a counterclaim in that lawsuit, okay? And this is his counterclaim. So for people who don't know what a counterclaim is when a person files a petition, they're asking the court for relief. What a counterclaim is the defendant who's being sued, if they believe that they're owed relief, they'll file a counterclaim against the party who's demanding action for relief as well. And Frank White filed this counterclaim, and it's still active to this day. Now let's look at the counterclaim. So here it is. And even though it says counterclaims, it's only one counterclaim. So what this counterclaim basically states is that, and so the main text is like right here, but as a summary, it states that Frank White is arguing that a large number of the signatures that were gathered were invalid because the signature gatherers that are listed as they're named in this petition as circulators, right? But those are basically the people that are gathering the signatures for the petition were not Missouri residents. And in accordance to Missouri law, when it comes to local issues and local petition initiatives, they have to be Missouri residents. And so what he's basically stating here is, and it's basically this paragraph right here. What he's basically stating is that pursuant to Missouri law, the court has to make a ruling that they have to order the election board to go back through all those signatures and basically take out the pages that were collected by these circulators that are not Missouri residents. They put on evidence in this counterclaim as well that showed that some of these petition signature gatherers were from Kansas, Oregon, California, Arizona, Michigan, Nebraska, and Colorado. And they believe that if the election board went back through all the petitions and took away all of the petitions that were signed or that were collected by these petition gatherers that were not Missouri residents, then they would not pass that 42,000 signature threshold. And this still has not been resolved yet. So as one person has put it, Frank White has already 2 outs. If Honorable Judge Seaton rules that he does not think that the petition gatherers had to be Missouri residents and that Frank White's counterclaims are invalid, then the case will essentially, like after the case is appealed and decided, like say the Supreme Court also decides that, then Frank White is done. He's not county executive anymore. However, if the judge, Honorable Seaton, or the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court state, hey, they actually have a point here. In Missouri law, when it comes to local issues, the circulator has to be a Missouri resident. Then, folks, this whole election might be deemed invalid, okay? So Frank White is not out yet. Like I said, it's 2 outs, it's not 3. This has not been resolved yet. Now, in this next document here, what happened is when Frank White filed the counterclaims, the Jackson County the Jackson County clerk, Mary J. Spino, she filed a motion to dismiss Frank White's counterclaim, stating that he didn't really have a claim to argue this legal remedy for this, to stop this election from happening. However, Judge Seaton denied the motion to dismiss, meaning that Judge Seaton is saying on face, Frank White has a case to argue to reverse this election. And as I stated here today, this has not been resolved yet. Here's the order here. Let me go down to the bottom. So it says here, the court finds that county executive's counterclaim asserts facts necessary to support a claim for declaratory relief. Therefore, it's hereby ordered that Mary J. Spino's motion to dismiss is denied. This case is still active, folks. This judge still has not ruled whether or not Frank White's counterclaim, or when I say Frank White's counterclaim, like whether or not the recall Frank White effort was lawful or not. If the judge rules that these petition gatherers had to be Missouri residents and then orders the election board to go back to verify those petitions and find that the 42,000 threshold wasn't met, then this whole election is going to be overturned, folks. So even though the likelihood is very small, as an attorney, I always tell my clients every case is 50-50. You have a 50% chance of winning and losing, no matter if your argument is strong or weak. It's always 50-50. So even though it seems unlikely that this is going to be overturned, there's still an active case here, everybody. And so this is still in litigation today. Sorry, I need to take this off here. Now, but besides that, besides, Frank White's last lifeline, we have a battle on our hands today, and I call this the battle for appointment. There are multiple people right now that are trying their best to become the interim county executive. As I stated before, right now, Kay Barnes is the interim county executive, but she's only temporary, so her position is only in there for 30 days. Pursuant to the Jackson County Charter, the Jackson County Legislature has 30 days to pick a county or to appoint a new interim county executive that will be the county executive throughout Frank White's term. If they're unable to pick an interim county executive, then the current chief of the Jackson County Courthouse, the chief judge, has to make that decision, who our current chief judge right now is Judge Harrell. I don't believe that that will happen. I think ultimately the Jackson County Legislature will end up picking the interim, but if that doesn't happen, then the chief judge will make that pick. So this battle for appointment really is the battle to 5 votes. Who is going to be able to get 5 legislators to agree that they should be appointed county executive? And this is actually a very highly contested issue right now. In my opinion, so a couple of, last week, several Jackson County legislators and the chair of the Jackson County Legislature, Deron McGee, basically stated, oh, it's going to be open. We're going to have this apply by application. But I can tell you right now, folks, that this whole application process is a farce, okay? People, like the legislature has been scheming for months as to who's going to get their votes to become the next interim county executive. And I'm going to go through you the four names that have been repeated in Democratic circles to take Frank White's slot as county executive until his term is over. But when I say these 4 names, keep on watching, folks. See who the Jackson County Legislature nominates as the 3 at the end, okay? Because I'm telling you, these 3, the 4 names that I mentioned, the majority of the 3 that are ultimately going to be nominated by the Jackson County Legislature for them to vote on is going to be, majority-wise, one of these 4, okay? So let's go through them. First off is Deron McGee. Oh my gosh, Deron McGee. So Deron McGee is currently the chair of the Jackson County Legislature. He has been implicated in so many scandals, and I'm going to go through them now. And the list that I'm going to go through isn't even a complete list of the scandals that are currently being alleged or substantiated to have happened, or that Deron McGee has actually done, okay? But these are like the bigger ones. So first off, there's the sexual harassment scandal that happened in 2019, where basically in 2019, Deron McGee was a state representative, and he had an employee who worked for him. He was sending this employee like text messages, sexual in nature, and basically when this employee told Deron McGee that they wouldn't have sex with Deron McGee, this employee ultimately was fired by Deron McGee, okay? Deron McGee still denies this to this day, but these findings were substantiated by the Missouri, or by the state of Missouri, the government of Missouri, okay? They formed a committee that was made up between 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, and they found McGee guilty of this, or they found the allegation substantiated 10-0, folks. So here, I'm going to put on a clip that was this clip actually came out several days ago that went into detail about McGee's about these scandals that McGee has been involved in.
Deals.
That's working for you. This is Fox 4 News at 6 p.m.
Only on Fox 4 tonight, bombshell revelations about Jackson County's top legislator who could replace outgoing executive Frank White. Fox 4 has obtained the never-before-seen report that shows Deron McGee lying to an investigator. What Missouri leadership uncovered when McGee was a state lawmaker and why it matters now. McGee, a likely option to replace Frank White after voters recalled the county executive yesterday. I'm John Holt.
I'm Lauren Halifax. So these new details include the romantic text messages sent to a legislative employee whom McGee later fired. Fox 4's Malik Jackson joins us with what he's learned. Malik, this story only on Fox 4 tonight at a time when uncertainty looms over the leadership of Jackson County.
That's absolutely right, John and Lauren. These are the more than 60 pages of text messages between Deron McGee and that employee. And here is that initial House report, investigation report, where he says that these romantic texts of him pursuing that employee didn't exist.
He lied.
To this day, you have not given us an ordinance.
These flyers have popped up in emails sent to Jackson County employees, urging them to say no to Deron McGee. The chair of the county legislature is a front runner to replace Frank White after yesterday's recall election.
There are potential limitations because of whatever problems he might have had in the past, and they are politically complicated.
In 2019, McGee resigned from the Missouri State House after an investigation determined he violated House rules by romantically pursuing an employee of his. Fox 4 has obtained the results of that investigation, which have never been made public. The report says McGee told an investigator that he never asked this employee out on a date or pursued a romantic relationship with her. But House leaders subpoenaed his phone records and found he sent text messages such as, "I think I'm in love with you. I see a future with you." And, "Will you marry me?" The text continued through March of 2018. In January of 2019, McGee eliminated the employee's position. That's when the employee took her concerns to then House Minority Leader Crystal Quaid.
You all know I've been the Democratic leader in the State House for the last 6 years.
Quaid and her chief of staff followed the House mandatory reporting policy, which led to an investigation into McGee.
Until that point, Deron McGee was seen as a rising star in the party, higher visibility, someone who had a future.
Fox 4 reached out to Deron McGee. He sent me a statement saying that he's deeply sorry for his actions. He goes on to say, "I did not fire anyone because they rejected my advances. I understand how perceptions can arise, but the idea that someone lost their job because of a personal rejection is simply not true." The question now becomes, will this disqualify him from assuming the role of interim county
It's not going to
executive?
disqualify him,
They're not
folks.
disqualifying at this point anyway. I mean, it may turn out to be that way, but until the process plays out, Malik, we won't know for sure.
Who makes the decision on if it's disqualifying or not?
Well, in this particular case, it'll be his colleagues on the county legislature.
Exactly.
And Fox 4 spoke with the lawyer who conducted the investigation. We also made attempts to speak with Crystal Quaid and the employee who was fired. We have not heard back. We did, however, make contact with Mark Powers, Quaid's then chief of staff, who detailed exactly what this new reporting lays out.
Now, hold on, man. Let me, yeah. Now, even though Malik said at the end that he wasn't able to get into contact with the lady who made these allegations that Deron McGee was actually sexually harassing her, or sorry, it's he or she, or yeah, he or she, we don't know the gender, that made these allegations that Deron McGee was sexually harassing this person and that fired this person. I have to tell you, as an attorney, there could be several reasons why this communication, or why this person didn't want to communicate with the media. One, they probably don't want to relive this entire experience. But more likely than not, this is what I'm thinking, is that if there was a settlement agreement that was made where the victim received compensation for McGee's unlawful termination, because in law, if you are fired because of because of reasons due to your sex, gender, religion, race, color, creed, or whatnot, you can file a race discrimination case. I'm not race discrimination case, but like a discrimination case against your employer, which would be Deron McGee or the state of Missouri, correct? Right. And before a public lawsuit is actually filed, it first goes to this administrative organization called, it's either the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or to the Missouri Human Rights Commission, which it's then administratively handled, right? So in this administrative stage, and this stage is not public, okay? They go into mediation, and essentially they can resolve the case at that stage so that it's never leaked to the public. So when I say resolved, if there was a settlement agreement in that stage that had an NDA attached to that, then of course the victim's not going to go public, because if this victim goes public, then they might have to give back whatever money they received in this settlement agreement. That's one of the reasons why this victim might not want to speak. But let's get back to the main point is that the state of Missouri substantiated these claims of the victim, that Deron McGee, that they believe Deron McGee was sexually harassing this person, and they also believe that Deron McGee fired this person because this person refused Deron McGee's sexual advances. We have to ask ourselves the question is this person fit for the role of county executive? And for me, it's no, definitely not. He's not even fit for the role of being a babysitter, folks. But right now, the Heaviest Contractors Association, right? And so we're going back to Bridget Williams, the person who was the leader, in fact, of the Democracy in Action. She actually wants Deron McGee to become the next county executive. So they're using their influence right now to push Deron McGee into that chair, even though everything that Deron McGee has done in his political career is like are severe indicators that he is unfit for this position. Now, besides the sexual harassment claims, there are other claims against Deron McGee. And this, like I said, this is not even a complete list. But there were allegations during the chief vote. And when I say the Royals and chief vote, it was a stadium vote that occurred last year, that he was receiving gifts from the Royals and Chiefs, basically receiving free stadium tickets to go to these games and whatnot. That should have been disclosed to the MEC. But there's also, and I don't understand why the media isn't really looking into this, but there were allegations coming out from Hickman Mills when Deron McGee was on the school board of Hickman Mills, where they basically stated that he used his position as in the school board when he was a school board member of Hickman Mills for financial gain, folks. There's actually a Missouri Ethics Commission report about this, right? And so McGee has proven time and time again that he will dabble in corruption. And at this time where we're already taking out County Executive Frank White for essentially not doing a proper job as county executive, we do not need to put in another person who also has these tendencies for corruption. So I received a question from Brett that basically states, how do we get the heavy lifters out of Jackson County? Hold on a second. Let me put that in front of me really quickly. Yeah, out of Jackson County politics. And that's why I'm saying why this election, and when I say this election, I mean the Democratic primary on August 4th, 2026 is so important. The only way we can get these heavy lifters out of Jackson County politics is if we prove that their money and their influence has no effect on the race. We proved this during the stadium vote when we had millions upon millions of dollars put in by, the Royals, the Chiefs, by the heavies to influence this race. But we as the Jackson County people came together to say no because we did not want to give blank checks to billionaires, especially to initiatives that were not concrete in nature. And that's the only way we get these people out of politics, because at the end of the day, I don't believe they have your best interest in mind, because no reasonable person would put Deron McGee as county executive, okay? And when I say reasonable person, no reasonable business owner, no reasonable recruiter for a political organization. There's a reason why the heavies want Deron McGee as county executive, and that's because he'll do essentially whatever they say. And that's just where we are today in the state of politics. And going back to the appointment, and why I say it's a farce is because you have to realize that the people in the legislature right now, they are a part of special interest groups and organizations, and they're going to determine their vote on who they appoint large in part by these special interest groups. And so that's why I've been telling people I have no way of actually being appointed right now because I don't deal in these circles. Herbert asked, can you clarify who the heavies are? Yeah, so the heavies, it's the Heavies Contractors Association. Let me just make sure I'm saying it's association and not, yeah, it's a Heavy Contractors Association, which is led by Bridget Williams, who's the executive director of this association. And she was also one of the people who led in fact Democracy in Action and collecting the signatures to recall Frank White. So that's the first person that's being strongly considered right now for interim county executive is Deron McGee. And also, folks, I want to also guide your attention to the fact that how I'm the only person, the only Democrat that is actually filed to run for Jackson County executive in 2026. This is not because people are still deciding whether or not they want to run for county executive. This is because there's a group of people that want to use the interim position as a way to springboard their campaign, right? So they want to be first appointed to interim and then announce that they're going to run for county executive for the Democratic side on August 4th, 2026, in order to get donors to donate to their campaign, because technically speaking, they will be the interim. And I'm going to get into that, our history of appointments, and why I believe that it's time for a change, folks. But let's continue. So the other person that's also being considered for interim county executive right now is Dan Tarwater, okay? And so Dan Tarwater, he's a former Jackson County legislator, and he's infamously known for getting into a fight with another county legislator named Bob Stringfield during a legislative meeting, okay? But he's also known for allowing the vote to give Tyler Technologies $17.9 million to do this property tax or property assessments that led to the property tax crisis of 2019 and 2023. He was also one of the architects of the jail deal. So for people who are unaware and who haven't followed all of my Let's Talk Jackson. So the current jail, or the current site that we're building the new jail on, is a site that's a historic floodplain, okay, that has two like creeks that are bypassing or that are perpendicular to the lot area. And so it's cited as a historical floodplain, but we still spent all this money to purchase this land to put a $300 million jail facility on it, like which for me was a crazy decision. But Dan Tarwater was one of the people that supported that decision. Dan Tarwater also represents the old regime, right? Where it's business as usual. You're not really going to get anything different with Dan Tarwater as you would with Frank White, right? Besides the fact that Dan Tarwater does have this past where he did get into a fight with a county legislator. The next person who right now is being considered is an attorney named Phil LaVota, okay? And I'm just saying, like, you can look this up, okay? Phil LaVota has cases that, and these are all filed on CaseNet, which is like the site for legal filings, that are filed against him by the Missouri Ethics Committees that he violated campaign finance laws, right? So Phil LaVota, like I said, he's an attorney, but several years ago, he was also a big member in the Democratic Party, where he would help a lot of candidates win their races, right? And so he kind of has like this past that ultimately will affect his race, because a lot of people in the past were not appreciative of Phil LaVota's tendencies to win elections or to influence races, right? The next person is Charlie Franklin. And I call him the status quo pick, okay? Because he still has like the luggage that Dan Tarwater has, where he supported all of Frank White's policies, wasn't there for the people during the property tax crisis, was essentially complicit during Frank White's tenure. However, this whole decision isn't necessarily about who would be the best county executive or who would be the best person for the job. The name of the game, folks, is who can get 5 votes, okay? And right now, the only person that I've heard of that's able to get these 5 votes is Charlie Franklin. And Charlie Franklin is just going to be the business as usual pick. And those are the 4 that are actually right now being severely considered right now for the next county executive. I don't know who else is going to go through this application process, but I'm just letting you know it's going to be one of those 4, most likely. Now, this is the part where I'm asking people for questions or comments about how they feel about this recall or about the appointments. And if you want to, you can ask me any questions or leave any comments, and I'll get to them now. One thing I'll say, though, is that we really do have a disease in this county with appointing our leaders of our county government. For some reason, I didn't put all the pieces together until I read this amazing article that was done by the Beacon that basically showcased that our prior prosecutor, our county executive, and our sheriff were all appointed before they became their position, right? So County Executive Frank White was appointed because the prior county executive, Mike Sanders, essentially had to resign because he went to jail. And the person who was appointed was Frank White, who then won the race again to become county executive. But you have to ask yourself, what did he run on? What was Frank White's policies? What did he promise to the Jackson County people? There was none. What essentially happened was, after Frank White was appointed, he was solidified as the next county executive, and the Democratic establishment just gave their full-on support for Frank White, and that's how he became the county executive to this day. He had no policies, he had no responsibilities, and he had no promises to the people, and that's why we're in this situation today, folks. Our current sheriff in Jackson County is Daryl Forte. The same situation happened. Our prior sheriff had to resign due to a scandal, and Sheriff Forte was then appointed. And instead of going through a highly contested election for the next sheriff, people just agreed that Sheriff Forte should continue to be the next sheriff without learning about his policies or without him making any promises for how he's going to reduce crime in the county. And as we all know, crime in the county is a massive issue that still exists to this day and hasn't decreased under Sheriff Forte's reign. But finally, Jean Peters Baker was appointed before she became prosecutor, folks. So this is why I'm urging people to really take this election in 2026 seriously, because we really need some reform in our government to happen. And the only way we can have that reform is if we stop this appointment process, which, if I'm elected as county executive, I will rewrite the charter to make it so that instead of these appointments from happening, it would just go straight to a special election. So Brett asked, do you think anything significant will happen while Kay Barnes is a temporary county executive? Will they rush anything through? Thank you for the question. I don't think anything significant is going to happen. Kay has already stated to the public that she wants minimal work, meaning she only wants to sign checks to make sure that the government is properly running. I don't think that they're going to pass through a stadium deal. And if they do, that would be crazy, right? So, but I think the likelihood of that is low. I think she's just there to be a placeholder and to sign checks to make sure that the staff is being paid, and that if there's any issues with anything, that she's able to essentially sign the order to make sure that the government is operating properly. So yeah. And with that said, if I don't have any more questions, I am going to sign off. But again, I want to make another push again for my campaign, to donate to my campaign. As I stated before, I'm running for Jackson County Executive. It's completely a grassroots effort, but the only way to clean up our county is through these grassroots campaigns. However, my campaign will need money to take it to the next step in order to beat whoever the heavies will throw in this campaign. So if you can, or if you're interested, please go to jacksoncountyexecutive.com and donate to my campaign. And if you're unable to donate to my campaign, please sign up to volunteer or to get more information about my policies and my plans to bring Jackson County to the modern age and to fight for our residents' rights. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this week's podcast of Let's Talk Jackson. And if you're listening to a recorded version of this and you have any other questions, please leave them in the chat box and I'll get through them back. But anyways, have a good night, you guys, and I'll see you next time.